Hello, welcome back to Cracking the Cryptic, and today we have got just a stunning puzzle to show you. This really is something. Now let me talk a bit about why I chose this puzzle today. I did a video a few days ago on a puzzle type called meandering numbers, in which I said, is this the new Sudoku? As I often get asked, what is going to be the new sort of puzzle craze? And the puzzle that I'm always surprised hasn't become a craze is the Star Battle puzzle, because it has incredibly simple rules and they're just extremely satisfying logically to solve, especially good ones. And this puzzle was sent in this week by Anna from Connecticut. Now, I'm not absolutely certain I know the provenance of the puzzle, except that the screenshot looks to me like it might be from one of the Toketa magazines, which come out of Japan. And the author, I think, therefore, of this puzzle is Maho Yokota, the brilliant Japanese solver and obviously setter. So if that's right, I want to make sure that Maho gets credited for creating what I consider to be a bit of a masterpiece. And why do I say that? What is it that makes me fall in love with this particular Star Battle puzzle? Well, it's because it contains a technique that is just beautiful to me. I don't know how many Star Battles I've solved in my life, but it's a lot. And this is something I've not seen before. And that to me is the essence of a really, really brilliant puzzle, is where, they take a standard form, something we're all very familiar with, and throw something new into it that makes you think about the whole puzzle structure in a completely different way. And that's what this puzzle did. So this isn't a live solve today, because I haven't solved the whole puzzle, but I've seen the trick of the puzzle from Anna's email. So I can't live solve it, but I can certainly talk you through it. Now, I really recommend you have a go at this puzzle. Just click on the link under the video, take you to our software. I'll remind you of the rules of Star Battle. It's incredibly easy. Basically, we have to put 2 stars in every row, in every column, and in every irregularly shaped area. Okay, so this area here needs to contain 2 stars. And the only other rule is that stars cannot be connected to one another, even diagonally. So if this square turns out to be a star, am I going to represent stars maybe with red? All of those squares could not be stars. So we would have to find a way of labeling those to illustrate that. That's everything. That's all you need to know to be able to crack this puzzle. And but I will tell you that even if you know those things, and even if you are an experienced Star Battle player, this puzzle might hold out for you. And I think one of the other things I just want to mention before I get into this puzzle is to say this puzzle is close to me to being the perfect puzzle in terms of a competition puzzle. In my sort of perfect competition, we wouldn't have competitions where bifurcation was of any use at all. Every puzzle would be quicker to solve it by spotting the logical brilliance of the setter, finding that logical way in. Now, unfortunately, because of the nature of the puzzles in the world at the moment, and various factors, bifurcation is often the most efficient way because people are so quick at calculating. But this puzzle, I'm sure it does break to bifurcation more quickly than if you never spot the logic, but this does have a very, very sweet trick in it. So let's talk about how to solve it. Now, the first thing that it's incredibly important to know about Star Battles, and it's a little bit obvious, but let's talk about it first, is that every 2x2 area in a Star Battle can hold at most 1 star. And that's pretty obvious given we can't have stars connecting diagonally, but it's also very relevant for trying to sort of divide up the shapes in the grid and find a logical way to make progress. If we look at this top area here, we can see actually we know it contains 2 stars and it has 2 2x2 areas. So we actually know for sure there must be 1 star in this area and 1 star in that area. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to help you enough to crack the puzzle. The other place I often try and find ways of making progress in Star Battles is with long shapes like this one. You can see this is almost a nice way in, because we know that row 1 must contain 2 stars, and we know that actually this shape is, it takes up an awful lot of row 1. So, but the problem is this square. This square could take a star, and if this square takes a star, it's perfectly possible for there to be a star in one of those 2 positions. So again, it's a little difficult to see how to make progress knowing those things. The third way of making progress is to use geometry. Now, the geometry in star battles is very similar to the geometry in a regular Sudoku. So what we do is we try and find a weak point in the grid to make an artificial division. And in fact, the easiest artificial division to look at in this puzzle is probably, in fact, we'll do a different one. We'll look at the division between row 2 and row 3. So if we imagine a line coming across the grid like this, we know that above this line there must be 4 stars because there are 2 complete rows of the grid. But we also know there's this area here that's completely contained in the first 2 rows. So what we now know is that there is a sort of relationship, I guess, between the innies and the outies relating to, this particular area, for example. If this particular area does contain a star, then we know that we're going to have 1 star here, 2 stars here, and therefore there must be exactly 1 star in that area. So in other words, there is also exactly 1 star in this area here. And it's by making these artificial divisions that you can sometimes find a way of making progress. Now, all of that said, I've gone through the sort of 2 or 3 standard techniques for making progress in star battles. I don't think they're going to help you solve this puzzle. And what I'm going to show you now is what you need to know to solve this puzzle. The first thing is to appreciate that this puzzle is a 10 by 10 grid. Therefore, we can divide this grid into 25 2 by 2 areas. Now, if we think about that for a moment, let's just stop there and think about that. So we know there are 25 2 by 2 areas, and we know that there are altogether 20 stars in this grid because there are 10 rows, each of which must contain 2 stars. So we know that exactly 5 of the 2 by 2 areas, if we divide the whole grid into these 2 by 2 areas, exactly 5 of them would not contain a star. Now, that's starting to hint at how we might go about solving it. But what you have to realise to solve this puzzle is that there is something very, very interesting about this area. Now, do pause the video if you haven't seen what it might be and see if you can spot it. And the trick is to realise that if I do divide this grid into 25 2 by 2 areas, then you can see that would be a 2 by 2 area. This would be a 2 by 2 area. I'm going to colour this. This would be a 2 by 2 area. And indeed, down here, this would be a 2 by 2 area, so this would be a 2 by 2 area. This would be a 2 by 2 area. And I wonder if you can see what happens here. So if we divided the grid, we would find exactly 7 2 by 2 areas fitting perfectly into this central arrangement. And why is that interesting? Well, that's interesting because this central arrangement contains exactly 2 shapes. This shape here and this shape. So I know that in this coloured area there are 4 stars because there are 2 areas. But I've also just fitted in 7 2 by 2 areas. So I know that 3 of these areas do not contain a star. Now, definitely worth having a think about that. Because if we combine that fact with this feature that we know the 5 2 by 2 areas overall won't have a star in them. Let's just think about how those 5 cells will need to, or those 5 areas will have to be arranged. Because obviously, if we go down the first 2 columns, for example, there are 5 2x2 areas. And yet I know these columns will contain exactly 4 stars. So down here, one of the 2x2 areas will not contain a star. Now and that obviously holds true whichever 2 rows, 2 columns I pick, exactly one of the areas will not contain a star. And therefore, once we look at this central arrangement here, if I know that there are 3 blank areas without stars in this arrangement, and I know that they cannot both be in the same row or column, it starts to get very interesting, because that means that of these squares here, of these 2 2x2 areas, exactly one of them won't have a star. In these 3 2x2 areas, exactly one of them won't have a star. Now, if that's the case, same obviously is true here. We know for sure, as one of these won't have a star, all of these 3 2x2 areas must have stars, because I know these 2 rows here are going to have 4 stars altogether. If one of these doesn't have a star, I'm going to get 1 star from one of them, 2, 3, 4. In other words, there is definitely stars in these areas here. Now I have to find some way of notating this. So I'm going to use grey, I think. Grey is going to indicate that a 2x2 area must contain a star. And therefore we can do a hell of a lot of highlighting as a result of that, because in every row and column affected by this central shape, we know that the outside shapes must contain a star. And I mean, this is staggeringly beautiful to me. Not just the colours in our software, but the logic, the thought that has gone in to create this puzzle. It's mind-bendingly beautiful. And look, as a sort of flourish, this area here is part of this shape. Now, we know there's a star in here, and we know there's a star in here. So if there is a star in this 2x2 area, and there are definitely 3 more stars coming down here in these areas because I've labelled them grey, there cannot possibly also be a star in this area, otherwise there would be 5 stars in the final 2 columns. So this area does not have a star. Now I need to notate that somehow. How am I going to do that? Doesn't have a star will be green. Okay, so this means doesn't have a star, and therefore we know this area here, this must have a star. We know that has a star because we said so before. So our 5th shape, our 5th 2x2 area that doesn't contain a star, must be in the top left-hand corner of the grid. Now that to me is quite stunning. It's quite stunning. And now what we're able to do is to start to think about actually how to solve this puzzle. All we've done first is the sort of initial logic that's allowed us to get a toehold. Now we actually have to use that logic to solve it. Now how are we going to do that? Well, I think there's a few ways. The first thing I would look at is, if we look here, we've got 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars. Now actually these 2 areas here, which are different areas, this area and this area, we know that the 2 stars in this funny shape must be in those 8 squares. So that means these squares are not in and this square is not in. And what could we do next? Well, actually what we could do next is we could have a look at the elimination of this square from being a star means this grey area here falls entirely within these 2 shapes at the bottom. Now let's look at how that works. We know there's 1 star there, 1 star there, that's 2 stars, 3 stars. So the only other, given that we know that these 2 shapes must contain 4 stars because they are 2 shapes, this little square here, I'm going to make red equal my stars, must be a star. So we get to place something in. Now Now we can do standard star battle logic. It's going to be a bit difficult to see because I'm adulterating my my 2x2 areas a little bit here. But if we remember, this is a 2x2 area, this is a 2x2 area, so this is a 2x2 area of which 2 squares are green. So I know there is a star in one of these 2 positions, therefore there is not a star in those 2 positions. And then I can see immediately this square can't be a star, because if this square is a star, because I know there's a star in one of these 2 cells and a star in one of these 2 cells, if I put a star here, the stars move down and there would be 3 stars in the bottom row, so that's not a star. And what we could do now is we could revisit. We know that there are 2 stars in this area here, but because we've managed to eliminate these 2 squares from being a star, there must be a star in one of these 2 squares. Therefore, there is not a star in one of those 2 squares. Now, can we use that to make anything easy further progress-wise? Well, what we could do is note that because this square can't be in, there must be 2 stars in this area here. Therefore, there can't be any stars in this area, but we know this 2x2 area contains 1 star, so there must now be 1 star in that area, so there is no star in that area. And this propagates down the grid, look, because we know that this is a continual sequence of 2x2 areas which contain stars. So this area must be green. There must be a star in one of these 2 squares, so this square here cannot be a star. Now, what could we do next? Well, so one thing we could do actually, let's look at this square. This is an interesting square. If this square was a star, then this area would have its 2 stars in it. Therefore, these 2 cells here, which we know are part of a sort of 1x2 arrangement where there must be a star in each, would have to both be stars, but that would push 3 stars into the bottom row. So this is not a star, so this is a star. 2 and okay, let's have a think again. Right, yeah, I think we might be able to do something more here. Is it possible that both of these grey squares are not stars? I.e., that would push 2 stars into these squares. Well, that's not possible because that would put 3 stars in this shape. So at least one of these, well, in fact, exactly one of these, because there's already a star, is a star. And that fills the bottom row of the grid with our 2 stars. So there are not 2 stars any stars in this area here. Therefore, there must be a star in one of those positions, which is fine, which means there is not a star in those 2 squares. Therefore, there is a star there, which means there's not a star there. There's a star there, not a star there. Isn't it beautiful the way this is starting to sort of reveal its secrets to us? Right, now let's have another think. Yeah, okay. So now I know there's definitely a star in one of these 2 positions. And I know if we look at this area here, there's a star in one of these 2 positions. Therefore, there's going to be exactly 1 more star, either here and here or here and here. Therefore, there's exactly 1 star either here in one of these 2 areas, exactly 1 star. Therefore, there can't be a 3rd star in this area here. So that square can't be a star. So this is a star. Let's just put in some green highlighting, look. Aha, and now this is lovely. This square here being a star, we know this sort of H shape here is going to have 2 stars in it. Now we know one of those must be in this 2x2 area. So these 2 squares are not stars. And therefore these 2 squares are stars. Now there's no more stars in column 1 of the grid. Therefore this is a star. Get rid of those, they can't be stars. Now let's have a look at column 3, where we need to put 2 stars. Well, the maximum, there can be 1 star here, so that's not star, and this must be the star. Put in some more. Now in this area, neither of these can be a star, because we know the second star in row 1 is going to be in one of these 2 squares. So they are not in. Therefore they are not in either. We have to be a little bit careful here, because we've got to remember that in each, there's only one of these areas that's going to be in. Now look at this though. We have a star here and a star in one of those squares. So this is not a star. And we can do a little trick there. We know that there is definitely a star in one of those 3 positions, so it's not possible for this to be a star. And the reason for that is if I put a star here, it eliminates all these 3 squares in the same, in one foul swoop. So we need to not do that. And I think what I'd do next is I would pay attention to column 10 here, where we've already got a star. So I mustn't put stars in the grid that force, for example, these 2 squares to both be stars. So this square cannot be a star, because the effect of it being a star would be to push a star here and here. That's not a star. And by the same token, this square can't be a star, because that would have the same effect on these 2 areas. So that forces that one to be a star. And you can see that is pretty potent, because now I get a star there. That's not a star. Can we do anything else there? Well, we can do a little trick. We know one of these 2 squares is a star. Therefore, this is not a star. If we look at this row, we know there's 1 star here. Therefore, there must be a star in one of these 2 positions. Therefore, there cannot be a star in either of those 2 squares, look. And now we get the same thing again. There must be a star in one of these 2 positions, so this square can't be a star. Now let's just have a quick stare at this, see if we can go any further. Oh yeah, and I see what we can do now. We know one of these is a star, and if we look down here, we know either this purple area will contain 1 star, or this blue area will contain 1 star. So it's not possible actually for this to be a star. That is impossible. So let's remove that from the equation. 1, 2. So now if we look down this column, look, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 stars. So this square is not a star. And now, oh yes, how do we put 2 stars into this shape on the left hand side? There's going to be 1 for one of these 2, so the only other square that can be a star is that one, so it must be a star. And I think as soon as we've sort of got the break into this central area, I'm anticipating that's going to be huge, because now I know this 2x2 area contains a star. I know for sure this area here does not contain a star. There is no way, because we know exactly there must be exactly one that isn't a star in this central 3x3 for all of the logical reasons that I set out earlier on. So now let's have a look at this again and see if this fixes the puzzle for us. Well, there's 1 star here, 1 star here, so this cannot be a star. But by the same token, as there is no star in this 2x2 area, there is definitely a star in this area, and that's the only possibility, so that becomes a star. Now we've got 2 stars in this column, so this is not a star, but this one is. This is the only possibility for a star in this column. That gives us 2 stars in this shape, so that's not in, and this one is. We've got 2 stars in this row, so that's not in, and this one is. That removes this as a possibility from being a star, so we know for sure this one is a star. That removes that one as a possibility, and that one must be a star. This star here sees this square, so that can't be in. That one must be in. We've now got 2 stars in the final column. Those 2 squares are green, these 2 squares are red. And I think this is close to a perfect puzzle. Honestly, it is absolutely beautiful. And if we look at this central area, which is sort of where we started with our trick to get in, you can see, as predicted, we've got exactly 4 stars in the area, which is obviously going to be the case because there are 2 complete areas. And if we divide it up into 2 by 2 regions like this, you can see that in each row and in each column there's exactly 1 fully blanked out area. So this area is fully blanked, this area is fully blanked, and this area is fully blanked. I mean, this is why I love doing videos on this channel, is to discover puzzles like this. It just absolutely fantastic. I'm very, very keen to get your feedback on this. Do let me know. I know we have a number of brilliant solvers who watch the channel every day, and I'm very keen to hear from you guys as to whether you agree with me that this is a work of art. This really is. And I'll also be interested to know whether you did it by bifurcation or not. Thanks very much for watching. Back soon with another edition of Cracking the Cryptic.